It's November at the West Lane Schoolhouse, also known as the Peter Parley Schoolhouse. There's a chill in the air as the neighborhood takes on the look of the fading season. In its early days, this school was heated by an open fireplace, and in later years by a wood stove, with firewood supplied by the families of the pupils and stored in a shed outside. Since it would be past harvest time, in the early days at the schoolhouse, there would be older students as well as the young ones who were first learning their letters. Typically in the 18th and early 19th century, a schoolmistress would lead the summer classes for the younger students, and in the winter, when the older students returned from their farm work, a schoolmaster would have charge of the school. A one-room school with just one teacher for all 8 grades meant that for a good part of the day, youngsters would be working on their own or just keeping quiet as other students had the teacher's attention. Among the students who went through this school in the early 19th century were the Goodrich children, Charles, Samuel, and Abigail, all of whom went on to careers as authors and publishers. Of the 3, Samuel achieved the most fame, writing books for school children as Peter Parley, a kindly old storyteller. Today, Jack Sanders is going to read the first pages of 2 history books, one by Charles A. Goodrich and one by Peter Parley, Samuel G. Goodrich. If you were a young student, which would be most likely to hold your attention? Both books were staples of education for decades.
History sets before us striking instances of virtue, enterprise, courage, generosity, and patriotism. And by a natural principle of emulation, incites us to copy such notable examples. History also presents us with pictures of the vicious, ultimately overtaken by misery and shame, and thus solemnly warns us against vice. History, to use the words of Professor Tytler, is the school of politics. That is, it opens the hidden springs of human affairs, the causes of the rise, grandeur, revolutions, and falls of empires. It points out the influence which the manners of a people exert upon the government and the influence which that government reciprocally exerts upon the people. It illustrates the blessings of political union and the miseries of faction, the dangers of unbridled liberty and the mischiefs of despotic power. In a free country where every man may be called upon to discharge the important duties either by his vote or by the administration of office, it is the business of all to be more or less acquainted with the science of politics. Nothing can better instruct us in that than the study of history. I suppose you have often met with the words history and geography. History tells us the story of mankind since the world was created, and may be compared to an old man who has lived for thousands of years and who has seen cities built and fall into decay, who has seen nations rise, flourish, and disappear, and who, with a memory full of wonderful things, sits down to tell you of all that has happened during so many ages. Geography is a description of towns, rivers, mountains, and countries. The things which a traveler sees in going from one place to another. Geography, then, may be compared to some roving fellow who has been all over the world in ships, stages, and steamboats, and who has come back to give us an account of all that he has seen. You will see then that history is a record of events that have happened, and that geography tells you the places where they have happened. In order to understand the former, you must know something of the latter. Now, in this little book, I propose to recount the history of the world. I shall therefore sometimes seem to put on an old graybeard of history, who has lived for thousands of years, and tell you what has come to pass. And sometimes I shall make you fancy yourself in a balloon or a vessel, and carry you with me to the places where the events I am to relate have occurred.
The Peter Parley Schoolhouse is now closed for the winter. We hope that in 2021 we'll eventually be able to invite guests in again. The Ridgefield Historical Society maintains the schoolhouse as a museum. The building is owned by the town of Ridgefield. Many of the furnishings and informational exhibits were installed by members of the Ridgefield Garden Club, who originally restored and reopened the building to visitors, decades after its last pupils sat at their desks. For more information about the Peter Parley Schoolhouse and links to other videos about it, visit ridgefieldhistoricalsociety.org. Programming at the schoolhouse is sponsored by Connecticut Humanities and Fairfield County Bank.